The night was eerily quiet, with only the distant rustle of leaves and the occasional chirp of crickets filling the air. But deep in the woods, something was stirring, something far more dangerous. A small, defenseless puppy had wandered too far from home, and now, surrounded by a pack of coyotes, it seemed like there was no way out. The hungry, relentless predators circled in, their eyes glowing in the moonlight, ready to strike. This wasn't just another wild encounter, it was a battle for survival. You can hear the soft whimpers of the puppy as it tries to make sense of the nightmare unfolding around it. Alone, confused, and trapped, it had no way to fight back or even escape. Every direction it turned, there was a coyote. The pack moved with precision, their instincts kicking in, and the puppy, despite its best efforts, was no match for them. The odds were stacked against him, and you couldn't help but wonder, would this tiny creature survive this terrifying ordeal? But just as hope seemed lost, a sudden sound breaks through the tension, a rustling in the bushes. Was it just the wind? Or could it be someone, or something, that might stand between this helpless puppy and certain doom? You won't believe who, or what, stepped in at the most critical moment, completely defying all expectations. This unexpected savior was the last thing anyone could have guessed. Was it a human? A family pet? Or something even more surprising? The tension is thick, the coyotes are closing in, and time is running out. The puppy, gasping for breath, looks to the shadows for any sign of help. And then, just as the pack pounces, the unspeakable happens, something incredible that will leave you speechless. Stay with us as we dive deeper into this heart-pounding story of survival, courage, and an unexpected twist that no one saw coming. Will the puppy make it out alive? Or will the coyotes claim victory? You won't believe who stepped in to turn the tables in the most dramatic way imaginable. Keep watching to find out how this unbelievable rescue unfolds. The night continued to grow darker, and the air became colder, sending a chill through the woods. The puppy, now exhausted from the constant movement and panic, could barely keep its legs steady as it stumbled through the underbrush. Its once playful spirit had been replaced by a fearful, instinctual need to survive. Each time the coyotes circled closer, their taunting growls echoed through the trees, causing the little dog's heart to race faster. He was starting to lose hope, and who could blame him? No one had come to help, and the surrounding woods seemed to stretch endlessly, like a prison with no way out. Back home, his family had been frantically searching for him. The puppy, a curious young dog named Charlie, had only been exploring the area nearby. He had been so excited to discover new smells and sights, unaware that he had ventured too far from the safety of his backyard. But now, there was no sign of Charlie, and his worried owners had no idea of the danger their beloved pet was in. They'd called animal control, posted flyers, and even asked neighbors to keep an eye out. They never imagined that the real threat wasn't just the woods, but the wild pack of coyotes that roamed the area. These coyotes weren't the typical skittish animals you might encounter from a distance. They were a well-coordinated group, experienced hunters who saw Charlie not as a pet, but as easy prey. They had already surrounded the area, methodically cutting off his escape routes, and now, it seemed like only a matter of time before they moved in for the kill. Meanwhile, the coyotes continued their relentless pursuit, the alpha leading the charge, its eyes fixed on the trembling puppy. Every step the coyote took was calculated, and every movement of the puppy was a signal to the pack. They knew it was only a matter of time before the puppy's energy ran out, and that's when they would pounce. The moonlight illuminated their faces, sharp features full of intent, teeth bared in anticipation. For a moment, it almost seemed like the forest had grown quiet, as though even the trees themselves were holding their breath, waiting for what would happen next. But something else was out there, something unexpected. Far off in the distance, there was a figure moving through the shadows. A flash of movement. At first, it was too faint to make out. Could it be a hiker? A wanderer? Or perhaps, as some might hope, a person who had heard the puppy's cries and was rushing to the rescue? The coyotes seemed oblivious to the figure at first, distracted by the puppy's weakness, but that would change soon enough. The figure grew clearer, and now, it was unmistakable. It wasn't a human at all. It wasn't anything the puppy or the coyotes would have expected in this wild, isolated place. As the creature moved closer, the coyotes' attention began to shift. Their instincts were sharp, and they could feel that something was different. This wasn't just another easy target. The figure was large, imposing, and moving with an energy that made the coyotes pause. For the first time that night, there was a sense of hesitation in the air. The predators slowed, watching, as though trying to figure out what they were facing. The mystery deepened with every second. Who or what was this figure? Why was it coming into the woods at this late hour? Was it a force that could change the tide of the hunt? The coyotes seemed to sense the shift in the atmosphere as well, their growls quieting, their movements slowing. Even the puppy, whose fearful eyes had been fixed on the coyotes just moments before, now turned its attention to the newcomer. A powerful silence filled the woods, broken only by the rustle of the leaves. The air felt electric, as though the entire forest was waiting to see what would happen next. Would this be the end of Charlie's journey, or was there hope yet? And if this mysterious figure truly meant to help, could they really stand up to the pack of hungry coyotes, determined to finish what they had started? The suspense thickened, and the tension felt unbearable. The figure was getting closer, but would it arrive in time? Or would the coyotes reclaim control? The answer was still far from clear, and every heartbeat seemed to stretch on forever. As the mysterious figure drew closer, the coyotes seemed to grow restless. The alpha, a sleek and powerful predator with fur as dark as the night, was the first to notice the shift. Its ears perked, and its nostrils flared, picking up a scent that sent a ripple of uncertainty through the pack. For a moment, the coyotes stopped moving altogether, their eyes locked on the shadow that had entered their territory. The pack was no longer unified in its focus on the puppy. Something, or someone, had disrupted their hunt. It was a subtle shift, but one that could change everything. Charlie, the puppy, felt a strange glimmer of hope. His tiny body, trembling from exhaustion and fear, couldn't fully grasp what was happening, but he sensed something was different. The presence that had appeared felt far less threatening than the relentless pack that had been closing in on him for what felt like hours. He glanced between the coyotes and the approaching figure, his heart racing with the hope that this might be his chance to survive. The coyotes, however, were not easily deterred. The alpha made a low growl, signaling the pack to stay alert. They had been hunting for too long, and their hunger was unbearable. This new threat might be unsettling, but they knew how to adapt. The leader's eyes flickered toward the figure once more before it shifted its gaze back to the puppy. The pack was already moving, though more cautiously now, circling Charlie once again, as if they were testing the boundaries of this new development. From the shadows, the figure emerged fully. It wasn't a human, nor was it an animal anyone would have expected. It was a large, imposing wolf, its fur a mix of grays and whites, streaked with the silver sheen of moonlight. Its eyes were sharp, intelligent, and wild all at once, full of a primal energy that sent a shiver down anyone's spine. This was no domesticated dog, no mere animal wandering the woods. This wolf was a force of nature, its presence commanding respect and caution from the coyotes, who, in their wild instincts, knew better than to challenge an alpha of this magnitude. The coyotes hesitated. The tension between them and the wolf was palpable, an ancient struggle of predators vying for dominance. The pack's leader growled low, its hackles raised, but it knew that this was not just a typical encounter. This wolf wasn't here for a simple skirmish. It was here to challenge the pack, to defend the helpless puppy that had wandered into its domain. For the first time that night, the coyotes seemed unsure. Their hunger was great, but the wolf was greater. Meanwhile, back in the town, Charlie's family had no idea of the dire situation unfolding in the woods. They had been searching everywhere, calling his name, knocking on doors, even reaching out to animal shelters, but Charlie was nowhere to be found. They felt the sting of helplessness. What if something had happened to him? What if they were too late? The fear of losing their beloved pet weighed heavily on their hearts, and no one could shake the feeling that time was running out. But little did they know, there was a far deeper connection between their family and the wolf now standing face to face with the coyotes. The wolf, though a wild creature, had once known love and care from a human, someone they had long since forgotten. The threads of fate were tying together in a way none of them could have anticipated. The wolf wasn't just acting out of instinct, there was something personal about this confrontation. The coyotes, sensing the urgency in the air, began to inch closer. The alpha, ever so confident, was sizing up the wolf. The pack was hungry, and it wouldn't back down easily. But the wolf, despite its wild nature, wasn't just defending itself, it was protecting something far more precious than food. The stakes were higher than ever before, and neither side was willing to back off. As the standoff continued, the puppy remained frozen in fear, caught between the two predators, both of whom had their eyes locked on each other. The silence was deafening, broken only by the occasional snap of a twig or rustle in the leaves. But something was about to give. One side would have to make a move, and it wasn't clear who would come out on top. Would the wolf, with all its strength and authority, be able to hold off the coyotes? Or would the pack, in its numbers and hunger, overwhelm the lone wolf? In that moment, as the standoff grew tenser and the uncertainty reached its peak, the puppy's fate was hanging by a thread. The figure of the wolf was the only thing standing between him and the coyotes, but even the wolf could not predict how this battle would end. Would the pack retreat, or would the fight escalate into something no one could have foreseen? The wolf stood its ground, eyes burning with intensity, every muscle tensed and ready for action. It knew the dangers, knew the risks, and yet it was unwavering in its stance. It wasn't just protecting itself, it was protecting the helpless puppy that now huddled in the dirt, trembling, caught in the crossfire of a battle it couldn't possibly understand. The air was thick with anticipation, the tension unbearable. The coyotes, still circling, could sense that something was different. This wolf wasn't just any intruder, it was a rival, a threat that would not be easily defeated. The pack remained silent for a moment, as though calculating their next move. The leader, the alpha, watched the wolf closely, its gaze full of wary respect. It had seen battles before, but this wasn't just a matter of hunger. This was a standoff, a power struggle that would define the fate of the puppy, and perhaps, the fate of the pack itself. One wrong move, and the outcome could be disastrous. The wolf was larger, stronger, and far more experienced than any single coyote. But the coyotes weren't alone, they were a pack, and together, they were dangerous. The alpha gave a low growl, a signal to its pack. The hunt was far from over. The coyotes began to inch closer again, slowly, cautiously. Each one kept its eyes fixed on the wolf, moving in synchronized steps as if testing for weakness. The moonlight filtered through the trees, casting long shadows that danced eerily across the forest floor. The wolf did not flinch. It was still, waiting for the right moment to strike, but that moment hadn't come yet. Charlie, the puppy, watched in wide-eyed terror. Every muscle in his tiny body was frozen. He had no idea what was happening, or who this towering wolf was, but he could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on him. He wanted to run, to escape this nightmare, but his legs wouldn't move. He could only stare up at the fierce, wild creatures that surrounded him. His heart raced, and his breath came in shallow gasps. Every instinct screamed at him to flee, but all he could do was wait and pray that somehow, this would end in a way that didn't lead to his demise. And then, just as the coyotes closed the distance, something unexpected happened. One of the pack members, a smaller coyote, broke away from the group. It was a bold move, almost as though it was testing the waters, seeing if the wolf would react. The smaller coyote darted forward, eyes fixed on Charlie, as if trying to claim the puppy once and for all. It was a calculated move. If the wolf reacted, it would be a sign that it was ready to fight. If not, the coyote could strike. The wolf's reaction was immediate. With a flash of speed, it lunged forward, fangs bared, and the smaller coyote yelped, retreating into the pack's formation. The movement caused a ripple of uncertainty through the rest of the coyotes. They were no longer sure of their strategy. The alpha let out a sharp, commanding growl, trying to regain control, but it was clear the pack was rattled. The wolf had made its intentions known, it wasn't going down without a fight. The tension reached a boiling point. The coyotes hesitated, looking to their leader for guidance. The wolf, unflinching, stood tall, its powerful frame casting an imposing shadow over the smaller puppy. For a moment, everything seemed to freeze, nature itself holding its breath, waiting for the next move. The coyotes could taste the tension in the air, but none dared make the first strike. And then it happened. With a sudden, unanticipated burst of movement, the pack surged forward all at once, forcing the wolf to react. The leader lunged first, teeth flashing in the dim light, and the rest of the pack followed suit. It was a coordinated attack, a final attempt to overwhelm the wolf with sheer numbers. The wolf, however, was faster than any of them expected. It spun, dodging the first strike, then whirling to face the next coyote that came too close. The forest exploded in chaos as the battle between predator and predator erupted. Teeth clashed, paws struck, and the night seemed to come alive with the sounds of struggle. Amidst the chaos, Charlie remained still, terrified, eyes wide with disbelief. The fight was happening all around him, but he could hardly process it. His world had become a blur of moving shadows and flashing teeth. But there was no time to dwell on that. There was no time for him to wonder who would win, or what would happen next. All that mattered was that the wolf, his only hope, was fighting fiercely, and he had to hold on. Somehow, he had to hold on long enough for this to end. The clash continued, the wolves and coyotes locked in a deadly dance. Neither side was willing to give up. The forest seemed to pulse with the raw energy of the struggle. And somewhere, deep in the woods, a family waited, unaware of the battle unfolding, but hoping beyond hope that their beloved puppy would find his way back home. Would Charlie survive? Would the wolf prevail? The questions hung in the air like an impending storm, and no one could predict the outcome. As the chaos of the battle raged on, the wolf fought with all its might, its powerful jaws snapping, muscles rippling as it swerved and dodged the coyotes' attacks. The pack's coordinated strikes were relentless, but the wolf was faster, more agile, and stronger than any individual coyote. The creatures danced a deadly ballet in the moonlight, the sound of growls, barks, and snapping jaws echoing through the forest. For a moment, it seemed like the wolf had the upper hand, its defiant stance driving the coyotes back, one by one. But then, something strange began to happen. The coyotes, once scattered and hesitant, started moving in unison again, only this time, it wasn't the pack that was responding to the alpha's commands. No, something darker, something even more dangerous had entered the equation. A low, guttural howl pierced the night air, chilling the bones of every creature within earshot. It wasn't the howl of a coyote, it was something far more primal, far more terrifying. The wolf paused, its ears flicking at the sound, its posture tense. The coyotes too froze, their eyes darting to the edges of the clearing. And then, emerging from the dense thicket of trees, another figure stepped into the light. This was no ordinary predator. A massive, towering creature, nearly twice the size of the wolf, moved with terrifying grace, its fur a deep, midnight black that seemed to absorb the light around it. Its eyes glowed an unnatural yellow, and every step it took caused the ground to tremble beneath its weight. It was not just a wolf, it was something far more menacing, a creature of legend, feared by all who roamed these woods. The alpha coyote, despite its hunger and determination, backed away, its ears lowered, recognizing the newcomer for what it was. The new arrival, an enormous dire wolf, was not just another predator. It was an apex creature, ancient, powerful, and relentless in its pursuit of dominance. It had come from the darkest corners of the forest, drawn by the conflict between the pack and the lone wolf. It was no coincidence that this terrifying beast had arrived just as the pack was beginning to overwhelm the wolf. It was as if the battle had called to it, summoning this unimaginable force. The coyotes, now visibly shaken, huddled together in a tight group, no longer the aggressive pack they once were. They were just animals in the face of a true predator, and they knew their chances of survival were slim. But it wasn't just the coyotes that were in danger. The wolf, despite its strength, was now in the fight of its life, not only against the pack of coyotes but also against this ancient terror. Charlie, the helpless puppy, had been watching in stunned silence, unable to comprehend the magnitude of the situation. But as the dire wolf appeared, his heart began to pound even faster. This creature was so large, so formidable that even the wolf who had been his protector seemed dwarfed by its sheer presence. Was this the end? Would the dire wolf overpower both the coyotes and the wolf before Charlie could be saved? The forest grew even darker, the air heavy with the weight of the impending battle. The coyotes, though dangerous in their own right, were now more like mere bystanders, watching the dire wolf with wide, fearful eyes. The alpha, recognizing the shift in power, retreated into the shadows, its pack following suit. The dire wolf didn't chase them, it didn't need to. Its mere presence was enough to scatter the pack, driving them deep into the woods, far away from the confrontation. But that wasn't the end of the story. The battle was no longer just about survival, it was about dominance. And in the face of the dire wolf, even the mighty wolf protecting Charlie seemed to shrink back, unwilling to engage in a direct confrontation. This wasn't just a fight for the puppy's life anymore, it was a clash of two colossal forces, each one vying for control of the forest. The stakes had never been higher. The tension in the air was suffocating as the two wolves stared each other down. Every movement seemed to carry the weight of 1,000 decisions, 1,000 lives. What would happen next? Would the dire wolf claim the forest as its own, leaving the puppy's fate to be decided by the whims of an ancient predator? Would the wolf, against all odds, find the strength to defend the helpless puppy, even if it meant facing this overwhelming terror head-on? Charlie's tiny body shook uncontrollably, and he knew that, in this moment, nothing was certain. The battle wasn't just for his life anymore, it was for something much bigger, something none of the creatures in the forest could fully understand. And as the two wolves faced off, the rest of the world seemed to disappear, the quiet of the forest swallowed up by the monumental conflict unfolding before them. The tension was unbearable, the anticipation heavy in the air. Would the mighty wolf fight back, or would the dire wolf claim victory? And if the dire wolf won, what would happen to Charlie, the innocent puppy caught in the middle of this brutal struggle? The answers were just out of reach, as the night held its breath, waiting for the first move to be made. The standoff between the two wolves was a moment suspended in time, the forest holding its collective breath as they locked eyes. The dire wolf stood tall, its dominance unquestionable, while the wolf protecting Charlie seemed smaller in comparison, yet resolute. The tension in the air was unbearable, as if the entire forest itself was waiting for the inevitable clash. For a long moment, neither wolf moved. The dire wolf's yellow eyes gleamed with an ancient, primal hunger, while the protective wolf, though clearly exhausted, remained firm. It knew that if it backed down, the coyotes would eventually return to finish what they started, and this time, they would have the upper hand. But if it stayed, if it faced this apex predator head-on, the stakes would be higher than ever before. Finally, the dire wolf made its move. It lunged forward with terrifying speed, its massive form closing the distance in an instant. The wolf defending Charlie, though slower, was no stranger to battle. It sidestepped, narrowly avoiding the first strike, but the force of the dire wolf's attack left the ground trembling. The protective wolf growled, its fangs bared, but it was clear that this fight would not be won easily. The two wolves clashed again and again, each strike more brutal than the last. The forest around them seemed to shudder with the force of their battle, the underbrush crackling underfoot. But as the fight raged on, something unexpected began to happen. The dire wolf, for all its size and power, seemed to be losing ground. The protective wolf, though smaller, was more agile, more cunning. It danced around its larger opponent, striking when it saw an opening, pushing the dire wolf back bit by bit. And then, in a single moment of perfect timing, the protective wolf managed to land a blow, a sharp bite to the dire wolf's flank that sent it stumbling. For the first time, the dire wolf hesitated, its golden eyes wide with shock. It was clear that this fight was not over yet. The protective wolf wasn't just fighting for itself, it was fighting for Charlie, for survival, for the very future of the forest. The battle wasn't just about power, it was about heart. The dire wolf, now visibly shaken, snarled in frustration. It was used to dominating, used to being the top predator. But this time, it had met its match. With a final growl, the dire wolf took one last, defiant look at the wolf and Charlie, before retreating into the darkness of the forest. Its form disappeared into the trees, leaving nothing but the echoes of its furious howls behind. The protective wolf, panting heavily, turned its gaze toward Charlie. The battle was over. The coyotes had scattered, the dire wolf had retreated, and the puppy was safe, for now. But there was no time to waste. The wolf, now weary and bloodied from the battle, began to move toward Charlie, its eyes softening for the first time since the conflict began. Charlie, still trembling in fear, looked up at the wolf with wide eyes, unsure of what to make of this new protector. The bond between them had formed not in words, but in shared survival, in the understanding that one creature had stepped into the line of danger to save another. The wolf nudged Charlie gently, coaxing him to his feet, and with a soft growl, led the way through the forest. But as they made their way deeper into the woods, a final twist of fate struck. The forest, once a place of danger, now felt eerily quiet. A distant howl, one not from the dire wolf, but from something even more unsettling, reached their ears. The protective wolf stopped, its ears perked, its body tense again. The danger was far from over. The fight for survival had not yet ended. In the distance, the sound of movement could be heard, footsteps, low and deliberate. Something, or someone, was watching them, waiting. Could there be another threat lurking in the shadows? The puppy, exhausted and still unsure of his fate, shivered once more, but the wolf did not flinch. Its eyes scanned the forest, its instinct sharp. This wasn't the end of the story, not yet. As the camera panned out to reveal the moonlit trees, the unsettling sound grew louder. The wolf growled low, a warning to whatever might be out there, while Charlie pressed close, unaware of the new challenge ahead. The final twist hung in the air, the tension rising once again. The true danger wasn't over, it was only just beginning. Would the wolf and Charlie make it out of the forest alive? And who or what was watching them, waiting for the perfect moment to strike? Only time would tell. The tension in the air was palpable as the protective wolf paused, every muscle in its body taut and alert. The distant sounds of movement were drawing closer, but this time, it wasn't the unmistakable footfalls of a predator. No, this sound was softer, more deliberate, almost familiar. The wolf turned its head, eyes scanning the surrounding trees, as the soft rustling of leaves grew louder. And then, from the shadows, a figure emerged. It wasn't another beast or threat, but a human, a figure the wolf had recognized earlier when the battle first began. It was the young boy who had been searching for his puppy, the one who had unknowingly stepped into the forest at the worst possible time. His face was tired, his clothes torn from the underbrush, but there was no mistaking the determination in his eyes. Charlie, still trembling and wide-eyed from the recent chaos, perked up as the boy stepped into the clearing. The wolf, seeing the bond between the two, allowed the boy to come closer without hesitation. It watched carefully, its body still ready to react if necessary, but there was no danger in the boy's presence. In fact, it seemed that he had been searching for Charlie all along, though he had no idea just how close he had come to losing the puppy forever. The boy knelt down, eyes brimming with relief and emotion as he gently scooped Charlie into his arms. Charlie, for the first time in what felt like forever, relaxed. He nestled into the boy's chest, the fear beginning to ebb away, replaced by the safety and comfort of familiar arms. It was then that the boy's gaze shifted toward the wolf, his heart pounding with gratitude and awe. The protective wolf had not only saved Charlie from the coyotes, but it had fought the dire wolf in a fierce battle, risking its own life to protect the little puppy. There was no denying the deep bond that had formed between the two animals, a bond forged in the heat of battle. The boy hesitated for a moment, his instincts telling him to stay away from the wild creature, but he saw something in the wolf's eyes, something more than just a predator, more than just an animal. There was wisdom there, and a quiet understanding that transcended the need for words. With a nod, the boy silently acknowledged the wolf's sacrifice. For a long moment, neither the boy nor the wolf moved. Time seemed to slow, and in the stillness of the forest, it was as if the world had come to a place of peace, at least for now. The protective wolf had done its duty, it had kept the boy's beloved puppy safe, had defeated the predators that threatened their lives, and now, It was ready to leave. The battle had been won, and the forest, for the moment, was calm. With a final, quiet growl, the wolf turned and retreated back into the shadows, disappearing as silently as it had arrived. The boy watched it go, his heart full of gratitude for the creature that had saved his puppy from certain danger. He didn't know where the wolf had come from or why it had chosen to protect Charlie. But he knew one thing for sure, that night had changed everything. The journey back home was quiet, the boy carrying Charlie in his arms, their bond stronger than ever. As they walked through the forest, the moon casting long shadows over the path, the boy couldn't help but reflect on the events of the night. What had started as a search for a lost puppy had turned into a story of survival, sacrifice, and the unexpected heroism of a wild creature. It was a reminder that sometimes, protection and kindness come from the most unlikely places. When they finally made it back to the boy's home, the first thing he did was wrap Charlie in a warm blanket, ensuring that his puppy was safe and sound. The boy looked out the window, his thoughts drifting to the wolf and the forest beyond. He knew that, though their paths had crossed under the most dire of circumstances, he would always remember the wolf that had saved his puppy's life. As for the wolf, its role in the story was complete. It had done what it had set out to do, protected the innocent, ensured the survival of the puppy, and left without expecting any reward. It was a reminder that the wild world, though harsh, still held moments of kindness and unexpected alliances. And with that, the boy and Charlie began a new chapter of their lives, forever grateful for the untold story of the night the wolf became their hero. The forest, too, would continue to thrive, its wild creatures living in the balance of nature, always watching, always waiting. The boy smiled as he watched Charlie settle into his bed, finally at peace. The night's adventures were over, but the memory of it would last forever, etched in the hearts of those who had witnessed the strength of the wolf, the courage of a little puppy, and the unbreakable bond between them.